Hello and welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari for the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you are not checking out Wes on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel with Blake Silverman on the pin down, you absolutely should. I always say it, there's a lot of great Pistons content out there, plenty for you guys to consume, especially when this team has a winning record, right? Like, it's fun right now. Consume the content, especially Detroit Bad Boys. Make sure you are subscribed to Omari Sankofa, the Detroit Free Press. Little shout out here for myself, the Motor City Hoops Substack. Would love for you guys to subscribe. It's free. I've added some new content over there, some video aspect from my guy, Harry Mraz of the Order of the Blazing Horse. But none of that's actually important because today we are joined by the GOAT, the man. Listen, don't tell anybody. I'll whisper it. Our favorite guest on the Pistons Pulse, Laz Jackson. What is going on, Laz?
I'm doing great, guys. Thank you once again for having me. Bryce, how are you feeling AFC Championship Sunday?
No. We're not going here.
No. I want to know. I need to know.
Okay, so I've said this. I'm not going to actually talk about the team or anything like that. I am truly a fanatic when it comes to the Chiefs.
That's why I need to know.
Yes, I am the irrational, over the top, doom and gloom, like sick to my stomach. Like, that is me. That's the only team that makes me feel that way is the Chiefs. And I always think they're going to lose. And this Bills team is really good. So I am nervous. I'm freaking out, and it's going to be a long evening. I will record the game. I will put my phone away. Oh yeah, I haven't watched the Chiefs game live in like 7 years. So
really, I feel like we've talked about this before, but what's the idea behind?
I don't want to set through commercials. I get too like antsy and stuff, and so I will record it. I will go find something to do away from my phone, away from my computer, away from the world. And then about an hour and a half after the game starts, then I will start it.
Okay. So not the whole game.
So you'll start watching the game late while it's still on.
Oh, yeah.
He's catching up. Like that, I understand a lot more.
Yeah, So it's not like I wait for the game to be over and know the score and then watch it. I just want to be able to watch it at the pace I want to watch it at.
So you're watching like the end of the game with everybody else, basically.
Sometimes I catch up. I still won't go on social media or like talk to people. Most people in my life know not to text me during that.
Okay, that was going to be my follow-up because it's like if you're eclipsing the end of the game and your phone blows up like and you're still like halfway through the fourth quarter, you're like, I just got like put it in the other room or something, right? Like
it goes in the bedroom on the charger until I have watched the game. Now, listen, it's been ruined for me. I told this story on Game Theory. I went on a walk. I wanted to go on a walk. It was like 8:00 at night, and I went on a walk, and I was like, nobody's gonna bother me, right? And I'm walking on the block because my wife said it was too dangerous to walk behind the house, where it's kind of like an open field behind the house, but whatever. I'm walking on the block. She's like, nobody will talk to you. Well, one of our neighbors had gotten home with furniture in the back of his pickup. And you can't just let your neighbor unload furniture from the back of his pickup without asking him if he needs help, right? Like that's the nice neighbor thing to do. So I stop and I ask if he needs help, and he's a Broncos fan. And that was the blocked field goal game. People may not know this, but the Chiefs beat the Broncos early in the year on a blocked field goal. And he's like, you're explicit Chiefs, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh no, what happened? And so it ruined it for me. Yeah. So anyway.
That's a lot of like, one, I respect your commitment to this plan for 7 years because that's really stressful. But this plan, like, requires a lot of good luck, like you have to hope that nothing happens that requires your attention for that entire time.
Yeah. And
sometimes you may get the game spoiled. So you just live with that. So that's just, I feel like you're living with fear either way. Like you're dealing with the anxiety of the commercial or you're like.
This is going to sound really bad. Gosh dang it. So Derek says it here. We love you, Bryce, but I think everything is so tired of the Chiefs winning every year.
Yeah, the Chiefs haven't lost that much in the last 7 years. So it's fine. It's worked out, Omari. We don't know what that's like.
Yeah, like we can't relate. Like we just won 15, like we're not used to
I can relate because I was there with the Chiefs. The regular season is kind of for the Chiefs. Like
that's why you can't relate because the regular season is. That's all we had was the regular season most years.
I'm just saying,
maybe a first round playoff exit.
If a regular season game gets ruined, it's kind of whatever right now because ultimately a Chiefs season is Either you win the Super Bowl or you don't. So like today I will put in a lot. I would never leave the house tonight because this game is monumental. So I will like take all precautions to make sure it doesn't get ruined. I will not go on a walk where it could potentially get ruined. You know what ruined it last year during the Super Bowl? People lit off fireworks. And I had not considered that people would light off fireworks if the Chiefs won.
See, this is what I'm getting at. Like, it requires a social contract that everybody cannot sign, like.
I don't care. I do not care. I can't watch it live. I can't do it. Okay, people are tired of the Chiefs and they don't want to hear this. So
thank you for indulging me. I appreciate it.
QT said, oh, no, QT, we'll get to that one later. Oh, there's a good morning from Brosaurus. Lots of Laz Jacksons is the man. Absolutely. You guys are all right. Oh, good morning, evening from Indonesia. We'll talk Miles Turner. We'll get Laz's thoughts a little bit later. So, all right. I wanted to ask you about the Lions real quick, Laz, but I feel like we've already went off. Real quick, your thoughts on the Lions.
So I'm not a Lions fan. I divorced the Lions after Calvin Johnson retired. And even through all this success, I felt like returning would be bandwagoning. And I don't really want to bandwagon. So right now I'm kind of like, I'm still team agnostic. The game was not a good game. I think it might have actually been useful for the Lions to not win 15 games, to win fewer games. So I think people's expectations would be a little bit more in line with like where they were as a defense. But Jaden Daniels is really good. I didn't think Jaden Daniels was going to be that good, especially not like, I remember Pac-12 after dark Jaden Daniels at Arizona State. Like that dude was like not the guy he currently is. And so, yeah, it's going to be a long, interesting offseason for the Lions. I hope for my own sanity, because again, I'm not a fan, but like everybody around me is. And now like people are starting to get my son like Lions stuff for Christmas and stuff. So it's like, okay, like I guess he's going to be a Lions fan. I hadn't really considered that, but I hope they get some like less injury prone free agents on the defensive side of the ball. That seems like it would be a good priority.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah, the injuries were crazy. Let's take a shout out to what Burso said behind Omari.
There you go.
Last night's game. Next time I'll say hello if I'm in a better mood during the game. Yeah, if you ever see me, you recognize me, say what's up.
They haven't won in Orlando in like 7 years.
Yeah.
So like it's going to be a while.
My wife just texted me and said, I love waking up to you yelling about the Chiefs. So for the record here, I want everybody to take note. My wife got to sleep until 9 this morning because I was taking care of everything around the house. So I hope she hears this, that I fulfilled my husband and father duties this morning. We got greetings from Poland. Okay, we got to talk Pistons because I know people.
Where's Poland?
In Europe, not in South America. I'm not the one that messes this up. That's Omari.
Well, I never said Europe is South America. No.
I do think somebody called us out for something we did not do.
I died laughing at that part last week. That was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Okay. We got to talk Pistons because people tell me on Twitter, like, I don't want to hear this aspect of your guys' lives. So we will get into Pistons. We'll start with last night's game. I like to start with the vibes, Laz, because for the last 4 years, the vibes are almost always the same. So what was the point in talking about them? Now I feel like the vibes can go up and down. For some people, they're amazing. For some people, they're not as good as what I expect. For you, where are the vibes on this team? Specifically, like, this has been a tough stretch of games, and we've seen a little bit of both sides of it.
Yeah, I think talking about the Chiefs is actually kind of instructive here because, as you mentioned, like, the expectations for the Chiefs are, like, go to the Super Bowl and win, and, like, everything else, like, kind of doesn't matter.
Correct.
And the Pistons are the complete opposite of that, where coming into the season, right, we were debating, like, okay, like, 25 wins, like, 30 wins would be great. And they're already at, like, 22, 23-ish wins, I think.
23, right? 23 and 22.
23,
yep.
Yeah.
They won I'm sorry to cut you up. I just realized they've tied their highest win total, I believe, since
we started covering the team.
Yeah.
Yes. This is me and you came in the same year. Obviously you in a much more important role. They've already tied the most amount of wins we've watched this team get in a season at 23.
I just realized that. Sorry, Lance, go ahead.
No, you're good. But so like for me, the vibes are high, and barring like a 15-game losing streak, which like I hope doesn't happen, like the vibes I think will remain high. I think people's expectations have started to get a little bit out of touch. Like once they hit the 60 and like they're officially out of the play-in, I think people hope/expect them to stay in that position all season, and I don't think that will be the case. But yeah, like I bet 25, I bet 24 and a half at the beginning of the year. They're going to hit that in like February. Like, the vibes are amazing as far as I'm concerned. The Jaden Ivey injury did put like a damper on things, but like in the grand scheme of things, like the vibes in my mind are great.
I feel like if they have Ivy through this entire stretch, which still since December 21st, they are, what is it now? Like 11-16 or something, like 11-5 or something like that. Like, like they've still been one of the top teams. Like, I feel like last night's game in Orlando was like, they probably could have got that if they had J.I. Like, they just needed one more problem solver, I think, offensively. But even just without that, like, how impressed have you been to see just how they sustain? Like, this is, like, we could go back, right? Like, let's not compare it to since 2020 or whatever. Like, when's the last time they sustained a stretch like this, period? Like, how far back do you have to go to where you remember, this long of a stretch of sustained good basketball?
You got to go back to like 2018-19, right? You got to go back to the Blake year. And even then, that was like, you hoped that they would win most nights. And I think they finished like 41-41, so like 500 exactly. Yes. Yeah. You'd hope they win like 45 games instead of like the 41 that they won. And then obviously, like, you'd hope for a little bit more playoff success than they ended up having. And that was because of Blake's injury. This year, like, if Cade stays healthy, I think like they'll probably make a play-in game. What level? I'm not totally sure. But you would think that the way that they've played so far over the last like month and a half, like you mentioned, Omari, has led me to believe that like no matter what, they'd be competitive in a series of play-in games. I think that experience would be really good for them. I think the experience of playing at a high level and competing at a high level in the NBA Cup was good for them and helped them like build to where they are kind of right now. And I think that like it was funny. I went to the Portland game, the Chauncey game, where they gave out the like bobbleheads because Chauncey came back. And that was like that's been a couple weeks ago.
I bet it wasn't as accurate as my bobblehead. Shout out B Bobbler.
No bobblehead is as accurate as your bobblehead.
The only narrative I push in the NBA world is B Bobbler should be the official bobblehead maker of the Detroit Pistons in the NBA. Only narrative I care about. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. So I have lower bowl seats. And normally I go to my lower bowl seat. My ticket rep was like, hey, like I got club seats, like you got upgraded. And I was like, oh, cool. And I had to like meet him in person to like go get the tickets to like get into the club seating. So like, all right, great. And then he was like, oh yeah, by the way, like if we make the playoffs, you have priority like ticket purchasing. And I was like, I hadn't even considered the fact that like we might make the playoffs. I might need to purchase some playoff tickets, right? Like that had not entered my mind until he said it. It's like, oh yeah, like they are playing well enough where that could happen, right? It's just, again, this whole season has kind of happened outside of the frame of reference of what I expected in September. So vibes are great.
All right, real quick, let's go through this. Laz, I want you to answer Omari. No, hold on. Derek Brown, thank you so much. You shouted out last week. Derek Brown gives us a super chat, says, been listening for years. Thanks for everything, guys. No, thank you.
So again, guys. Shout out to Derek,
Yeah, the super chat is open. If you guys want to, put those in there, we'll kind of prioritize those. But we're still going to get to all your questions. And Derek, you have some other questions we will get to as well. But thank you so much. Always want to shout out RB Nesbitt because he was the first one that locked that in. So I'm going to go through the teams in the East, and you just straight up tell me, are the Pistons better than that team? The Cleveland Cavaliers?
No.
Omari, you have to play also.
No. So I was like, man, this coffee's good. Sorry, go ahead.
The Boston Celtics.
No, even though they've been playing really poorly lately.
They have.
No, I think Boston's just dealing with the post-championship hangover. Like, they're bored. Like, we'll see them lock in with like a 12-game winning streak in late March or something. But yeah, no.
The Knicks.
They've beaten them a couple times, but no.
They just beat them twice in Madison Square Garden.
Okay, who is going to win more regular season? Like, who is the better team to win regular season game? I'm trying to get to the standings thing.
No, yeah, the Knicks.
Okay.
Okay.
The Milwaukee Bucks.
No.
They have Giannis. They have an MVP.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where I think it gets interesting. The Indiana Pacers.
No. They've beaten them twice. Or the Pacers have beaten the Pistons twice. The Pistons have beaten the Pacers once, I think. And it seems like, in particular, the Miles Turner of it all is any stretch big is a really bad matchup for the Pistons. But a stretch big like Turner who can stretch the floor and play defense, it's just like a really, really bad matchup for them. So yeah, I think the Pacers are probably better.
Yeah, I would say Pacers are probably better too. Like I think it could go 6 or 7 games.
Yeah.
I just think over the course of that, like those differences would add up. Like
that would be a fun playoff series to watch.
It would. And I think what I always come back to is like I don't know that there is an argument. Like Cade is probably the best player between those two teams, but do the Pacers have the next
3 best players?
3? Okay. All right. Same page. All right. Healthy Orlando Magic, who Detroit is ahead of in the standings right now, but we finally saw healthy Orlando last night.
No, they're not better than them. Orlando's too big, too strong. And if they get to play as physically as they were allowed to play last night.
I was going to say, like it's like halfway WWE at times. Like, I don't know. So, that's a physical series.
So here's my point. Those 6 teams are probably all better than this iteration of the Pistons.
Yeah.
And I think that is why we have to be at least understanding of why I think people like us continue to talk about the Pistons in the play-in as opposed to a top 6 seed. Because I'm just not sure, not considering injuries or anything like that, those teams are pretty good. Those are good teams. Again, Cade may be the best player between the Orlando and Detroit rosters. Paolo and Franz are definitely the next 2. Like, it's not even close. Yeah. And then you start to get into like Jalen Suggs versus whoever and all of that.
Franz had a real superstar moment last night, but go ahead.
Franz was incredible. He was awesome. And Paolo was incredible for the first 42 minutes of the game. Or what the problem was, Detroit. Let's talk about the game. I thought the big difference there was Ausar was guarding Franz and doing a really good job. Paolo was going crazy, so they put Ausar on Paolo, and then they didn't have anybody to guard Franz. And to me, that's kind of the point, right? Is Detroit doesn't have that second guy on a night-to-night basis like always, and Orlando did. So what did you think about last night, Laz? Like, what were your takeaways from that game? Or even the other two? Like, you can, the wins over the Hawks and the Rockets, which were great wins.
So I was glad they were able to make it a game last night. I felt like I didn't think that game would be as competitive as it ended up being because the Magic, again, just have too much size and skill like across their positions. The point you made about Ausar being forced to like play the hot hand and the Pistons not really having another guy is like, that was well made. And to me, that was like readily apparent as well. It was also really apparent to me that Cade kind of went off in the third quarter when Suggs, he picked up his 5th foul.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then third.
Yeah. And so Cade got to attack like Anthony Black and Cole Anthony. And like those went much better than him trying to like get on KCP or Suggs. And I think that if the Pistons had another primary ball handler, right? I know this is not an original thought. I'm not the first person to say this, but if they had somebody else who could kind of keep that offense afloat in non-Cade minutes, like I would feel a lot better about this team. Far too often, I really feel like when Cade leaves the floor, the plan becomes like, all right, we need Malik Beasley to hit like 3 threes in 5 minutes, right? And it's like, sometimes that's a great plan because sometimes it works. Sometimes less great plan, right? And Sasser has played okay, but I think this has been tough. The difference between what Sasser gave them as a like nominal point guard and what like Ivy gave them as a nominal point guard is really apparent in my mind.
Let's go to a break, Omari. When we come back, I think it's probably best to just stay on this point and figure out what the answers could be to what Laz brought up. So when we come back, let's talk about this secondary creation, whether it's somebody else on the roster, whether there's schematics, or it can probably start to push us into the trade deadline conversation as well. We'll get into that right after this.
All right, we're back with segment 2, and we're going to stick on this topic. Just the Pistons very clearly needing that second creator. I mentioned earlier, like last night was one of a few games since J.I. went down where I think the Pacers was another game where I felt that way, where it's just like they just need a second guy who can, attack off of Cade being harassed, right? Like J.I. is the only guy on the team who could really fulfill that role with consistency, because obviously a lot of Malik Beasley and THA's ability to get off is Cade, right? So I guess where are you at, Laz? Like, to what extent, do you think J.I.'s injuries hurt them? And how do you solve that? Like, is that just a trade deadline thing you turn to, or what do you do?
So J.I.'s injury has definitely hurt them, like in that way and in other ways, right? Like he was shooting 40% from 3, right? Like that's not something I think you can just like wipe past. I do wonder, because I personally would think that has the plan changed, right? Again, we talked about expectations coming in. It's like, all right, we're going to compete. We're going to, see what these young guys got. It's like, oh, these young guys have way more than we thought they did. do we need to go get something at the trade deadline to have a successful season? Or has Cade proving he's an all-star, like potential all-NBA level player, kind of given us all the answers we needed? And so we don't need to surrender any assets. We can eat some bad contracts or whatever, get some more assets in and just kind of ride it out and see how the magical season ends, as opposed to being like, okay, no, we need to step on the gas a little bit. I mean, I have some names of guys that I think would be good for them to get, but it's all about, what are you willing to give up? And after the JI injury, there aren't a lot of pieces on the roster I'm comfortable surrendering in trade, right?
I want to start with the roster first, Laz. Do you think there is an answer on the roster, or is there something? Because I continue to put in my game notes that I would love to see Ausar playing in the non-Cade minutes, because I don't know if he's ready or not. I actually have questions because sometimes the handle is loose, sometimes the passing is off target, all of that. But if you're going to go without a secondary creator on the roster, because I don't consider that to be Marcus Sasser's game necessarily, I would rather see Ausar go ahead and try to do it. If they're going to be in this realm, why not use this as an opportunity to see if he can create and drive offense in some way? Do you agree with that at all? Do you think there's a different option? Maybe you disagree and you do think Sasser can drive offense in that way, or is it just set actions? Is there an answer on the roster that even you'd want to see them try?
No, I agree with you that I would like to see them try Ausar. I don't think it would go amazing, but I think that again, the purpose of this season was supposed to be these guys trying to figure this out, right?
Yeah.
And sure, in the long term, you need to know if he can do this or not. And so you need to give him the reps. You need to let him see if he can do it or not. I don't want to see him too much in non-Cade minutes, because then the stagger gets weird.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. That's a good point. Fair point.
You're coming into okay, are we playing the second half of the second quarter without Ausar? And that's not a place I really want to be.
Yeah.
So I think the current rotation makes it a little wonky, but we saw what a Cade, THJ, Malik backcourt looked like defensively, and it was not sustainable and not something I'm really interested in repeating. And so it's okay, so we do kind of need Ausar in the starting lineup. And so it becomes a question of how do you mess with the rotations in a way that you can make that possible. I think that the other answer is Ron, right?
Sure.
If this were late February, early March, I would be yeah, man, let Ron run 20 pick and rolls a game and let's just see what happens. It's not that time yet, but I would be curious. Ron has looked really confident offensively lately. He's shot 35% from three over his last 15 games. The shot looks quicker and a little bit more decisive to my eye. And so in those bench minutes, I would like to see him given the opportunity to do a little bit more. It's not going to go well. Just it's not going to go well. But that would be something I would be curious to see more of. Yeah.
I mean, especially if you got a tape, just a guy that initiates offense, Omari, would you be interested in that? And this can start leading us into who are the names that they could go acquire to even just run the show on the offensive end. And then you're using Ron and off-ball actions that aren't just to catch and shoot like what Beasley and THJ do, but get downhill, pressure the defense, put him in situations to make decisions to see if he can do it or not. Give him those live reps. Omari, you have any thoughts real quick on the roster? Is there anything you would like to see, or is the answer really what we're about to get into in terms of all of the names are getting thrown out in the chat? I'm interested to see the names you have at the top of your list, Laz, as well. Is there an answer on the roster first, Omari, before we talk about these outside options?
Yeah, I was going to say probably, I don't know. I think on paper, Ausar is probably best equipped to handle that. But I think his handle's a lot stronger in transition than it is in half court, which again, and this is kind of the next one I was going to get into, but you're at the point now to where it's what problems do we need to solve this season, right? At what point, is there a point where this season's needs begin to exceed the needs of, the seasons to come? Because the thing is, they're 23 and 22 undermanned. All season, people have felt like they need more buy-in, this and that. They've still exceeded all expectations. They're 23 and 22. So, I think if you're the front office, and, you're looking at difference makers, it doesn't make sense to go in on this season, essentially, when you have all this stuff coming up and you've already overachieved. You already, you've already matched their highest win total from the last 5 years with all these supposed problems, right? So does this season become a priority? A lot of people talk about CJ McCollum, this and that. Do you need to do that this season? I think is my broad question. And that's what the front office is debating. Like, what does CJ McCollum solve beyond this season? And, if you're not sure, then I think that's sort of the philosophical debate you have. Like, is 23-22 worth buying into, if that makes sense?
So RB Nesbitt says, and again, thank you for the super chat. We appreciate you very much. Said, this team reminds me of the Pacers from last year. Do you guys think the front office needs to make a significant upgrade to the roster? I think this is the heart of the conversation, Laz, in terms of, do you think they're really ready to go? Like, if you upgraded, are they really competing in a series? Are they pushing to the 5 seed and then they get an opportunity to win a playoff series? Or do we truly think, even if you brought in a CJ McCollum, you're capping out in the play-in and that's it? Like, I think that's where the conversation becomes interesting. And to Omari's point, then what does that move mean for future? I have my thoughts on that with CJ, but I don't even want to go to CJ necessarily. I want to go with the top of your list. You did the work. You have the notes. You showed us. Who's the name at the top of your list that you want to start off this conversation with?
So the guy I want to start with is Kobe White for 2 reasons. One, I don't think the Bulls are interested in being super duper competitive. And so I think,
can we pray, Laz, that they have finally decided that they need to take this path?
They're 10th or 9th now. So it's like, maybe
they're
like 7 games under 500. It's unreal. Like, they're like 17-24. The Sixers, who don't have anybody on their team, are half a game back when I looked this morning or something like that.
I feel like the Bulls' plan has just been vibes. There's nothing else going on except just
bad vibes.
Yeah. But they're just vibing. Like, they're just like, like there's a 2 out of 3 chance every night that we might lose, but we're just going to keep writing this out. Yeah.
Okay, Kobe White. Let's live in the world where the Bulls actually do what they're supposed to do, and Kobe White's available.
Yeah, I like Kobe because he makes $12 million this year and $12 million next year. So it's not a huge roster imposition. Because the contract is so small, you don't need to you're not trying to aggregate THJ and Tobias to get some, I don't know how you get to CJ's number, right? CJ's 35 million. I have no idea how you get to that number. But that to me, and you can play him off the bench. You can play him in the starting lineup. He's flexible, he's versatile. And crucially, the thing I'm a little worried about is if they trade for one of these guys and Ivy's going to come back eventually, then all of a sudden you have not too many ball handlers, but too many defensive deficient, sort of secondary ball handlers. It's you might be better suited filling out the roster other ways, right?
Kobe's interesting because he can get a bucket, and that is something the team would need. I feel like he probably fits into that secondary, or second unit role, third guard, that type of stuff. So yeah, I wasn't expecting that one either, but that Bulls team is interesting because I'm if I'm them, I'm not selling on LaVine I'm not selling on LaVine. I am taking in assets for Zach LaVine right now. And then I've seen all of a sudden, they're a Bradley Beal team somehow. And it's and they just made a move for Josh Giddey. And it's what are they doing in the backcourt? The other name I like there is Io. I don't know what they're doing with him, but he's another guy that I like for that team.
In the IO phylum, I guess another guy on my list was Keon Ellis. I was hoping the Kings are going to keep losing and keep not playing Keon Ellis. And it's okay, Keon Ellis is free, right? But that's a guy who 3-and-D guard, right? Not really another, that doesn't really fix your ball handling and playmaking issues. But I think that's a guy who, if you replaced him with Ausar in the starting lineup, all of a sudden now you can give Ausar more reps as a ball handler guy, in the second unit, and you're not getting, killed defensively in the starting lineup. So that was another guy on the list. So I like the IO idea, even if I also don't think of him as a primary guy.
Yeah, no, I don't think he does the ball handling stuff as much either. It's just a guy. I mean, the names that solve, let me just ask you guys this. Lonzo, let's start it with CJ. People brought up in the chat, CJ is simple in terms of THJ and tech, where that is simple money-wise.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to reinforce here is you are now giving up 2 rotation players for 1 rotation player. And yes, CJ is an upgrade over Tim Hardaway Jr. I don't think there are any questions about that, but just listen, I'm not the highest Fontecchio guy right now, and I was 6 months ago, but there is certain size he provides on the wing forward position. Just something to consider if you're moving 2 contracts. Your thoughts on CJ, Laz? My quick is, I think he makes a lot of sense for this year. I think they're going to operate as an over-the-cap team this offseason anyway, so I don't think that the money ends up mattering. And then he's an expiring deal next year who I would like to think he would be comfortable moving to the bench next year. Now, that's a lot of assumptions and ifs, but I do think I would be comfortable with that. I would not move real assets for him, though. Where are you at on CJ McCollum?
Yeah, I like CJ as a player. I've kind of always liked CJ as a player. I don't think trading for CJ gets you to like winning a playoff series or like getting or like locking down the 6th seed and like playing a real playoff series, right? And so because I don't think of him as a difference maker in that way, I probably just wouldn't do that to keep things a little bit simpler. But I like CJ a lot as a player. I'd be interested in CJ when he becomes a free agent 2 years from now.
Yeah. He has one more year after that.
Yeah.
So it's a short contract. It's not bad.
And like that New Orleans situation is one where I think guys might start looking better after they get out of that situation. What do you think, Omar?
Yeah. Just getting to like, where does that put them as like a playoff team, right? Like, I don't think that makes you a 2nd round team necessarily. I think that solves some issues on the court, but I think this team has already proven to have a pretty high floor. So that's kind of what I go back to where it's like, okay, well, I'd like to trade for CJ just to make Cade's life easier for these last, 35 games, and maybe we win, and then maybe we can, win a couple extra playoff games, but that's not going to turn you into a championship contender. And that's basically it. Like, this is not a championship move. That's purely he helps this season. And then maybe if you believe that just from an asset standpoint, like that could really help you this offseason, or you even like the idea of bringing him into next season. That's a little bit different. And I guess it really just comes down to like what it would take to get him, right? You talk about trading Tech and THJ and Sasser, and like THJ and, Sass, like, they've Tech, like all these guys have been really great in the locker room. Like they're close to these guys. So that's one thing I think about too. It's like you get marginally better as a team, but what are you sacrificing behind the scenes? So I'd like, long story short, I think the CJ McCollum conversation should be more from like a contract sort of asset standpoint, where something like what he does on the floor. Because again, I don't think the front office is thinking we can't have Cade turning the ball over 10 times in this overachieving season. Like, it's like, okay, he's like, you problem solve, you figure stuff out. Like, they're like, the bottom line is that they've still been winning. Like, it's not like they are losing because of these issues.
Ryan Malone says, couldn't we aggregate CJ for a big move next year? Yes.
I think if CJ could be aggregated, New Orleans would have done that already.
Well, no, but we could trade for him. Detroit could trade for him at the deadline, and then by the offseason, they could aggregate him.
Yeah, no, I understand the mechanics. I'm saying, like, if like New Orleans has already had a really bad season, if they thought this offseason, right, like they were in a position, like they brought in.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Like if I think if that could have been done by now, like it kind of already would have.
If you're saying if CJ was an actual asset, New Orleans would have already used him as one in a move.
Yeah, at that contract size, like I don't think of him as like purely positive asset, like in a flip, right? Also, like people are bringing up like Laurie, like Laurie's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Wes says the same thing. If you get CJ in a salary dump, are you sure he's not? I think what CJ would be is salary matching. Right? Like that's the thing. And you would have CJ's number, you would have Tobias's number, and those are expiring deals that make more sense.
Yeah, I guess CJ is like a super clean flip for Zach LaVine, right?
Yeah.
But like,
or like Devin, right? If Devin Booker becomes available all of a sudden, and if Phoenix wants,
that's a much bigger conversation.
No, but listen, but you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like if the Suns will not, but if they decided to blow it up, you would have the money between Tobias and CJ on expiring, which would be attractive to teams. And then you would have to include the picks and the young guys and all of that, right? Like that's the super move that's a couple years away. I think we probably all agree with that. I think what this comes down to is, let me just ask this then, Laz. are you comfortable? I think we all think they're at least going to make the play-in. Are you cool if they go to, I think what I don't mean to speak to people. I think what their worry is they get to a play-in game and then they're just completely unable to be competitive in said play-in game because they don't have this player. And then there's no data collection in that, or they miss out on an opportunity of winning the play-in, getting into a first round series against the Celtics or the Cavs or whatever, and they just get swept 4-0 by an average of 18.5 points. Are you worried about that? Would that bother you if that happened? Because
that'd be a great resolution to the season. Again, like given the expectations they had coming in, right? If I told you in October, like, hey, they're going to get swept by the Celtics in the playoffs, you'd be like, they made the playoffs? And like that. So like, no, I don't think they need to like swing for the fences. I don't think they really need to be in like, let's make the playoffs mode. I think the players like absolutely like want to win every single game. And I don't want to like dissuade them of that. Like I wouldn't start tanking. Like the first round pick is gone. Like in my mind, like I think this is the year they finally surrender that first.
You know what's funny? I was doing a mock draft and I was trying to get Rasheer Fleming to the Pistons, and I just kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and then I was like, oh my god, like, I'm not going to be able to do this because they don't have a first round pick. This is what just happened, Omari. No first round. We're not going to get talking NBA draft.
Yeah, that would. Honestly, I'd be cool with that. You know, like I've done a lot of draft stuff over the years. Like that, I know you're the draft guy, but that would also free you to like just do it from like a purely national standpoint. You know,
Omari was like, all right, like 2 days in Vegas instead of 3, like perfect, amazing.
No guys to really cover it. Summer League. Mr. Ray, listen, I know we've disagreed on this, and I want to make it clear. I respect your opinion 100%. Zero data collection just because we didn't have one secondary creator. Where I would disagree, here's where I feel. Laz, I want to get your thoughts on this and we'll go to break. I think we're getting data collection every game because every one of these, and I realize the play-in is different and the playoffs are different, but think about what we've got to analyze over the last 4 games against these teams that are trying to win at full health, jockeying for playoff position. We're learning stuff right now. Listen, guys, I know what I need to know about Cade Cunningham. Like, I'm pretty well good in terms of I know what he needs to improve on. I know what he needs to be successful, all of that stuff. I'm learning more every game about Jalen Duren. Like, I feel pretty good about where he's at and what he needs to get better at. I didn't feel that way coming into the season. So I guess my point is, and would get interested to hear your thoughts, I think they're getting competitive regular season games, and they're only going to get more competitive, where I'm okay if it ends up being 1 or 2 and done in the play-in, and that's enough data for me to then make some decisions going into the offseason.
Yeah, I think you made this point last week, Bryce, that like teams no longer sit all their guys against the Pistons because they treat the Pistons as a serious competitive team that they need to compete against in order to be able to win. And I think as long as that continues, like we are getting the information we need from the rest of the season, right? Like, yes, I do not love the Cade 10 turnover games, of which there were 2 this week. He's averaging 5 turnovers a game since Ivy's injury. It felt like he was averaging like 7 a game at one point, but like that number had come down. Like now it's climbing back up. So I don't love that. And it is pretty clear that like the offense is sludgy, like when he goes to the bench. They have
That's
to.
That's a good word, sludgy.
They got to manufacture stuff. It's like everybody can see that. But because like, I don't know, it didn't take us 15 games to figure that out. Right. Like especially when Ivy went down, it's like, okay, like we knew this was going to be an issue. And so like that is something I think you can address in an off season, not something that you like absolutely positively like need to address right now. And if you feel like as a front office, you do need to address it right now, you spend, $15 million on it. They have 14 in cap space, right? You spend $14 million on it, not $35 million on it.
All right, let's go to break. Omari, I want to stay with this because then I want to have the $14 million conversation. We've been having the $35 million conversation. I want to see your guys' thoughts on some names that maybe thread that needle a little bit more, don't require a ton of assets, and maybe fit into that $14 million bucket. We'll get into that right after this.
All right, let's go to segment 3. And we're going to stay on the trade topic here. So quick plug, I did a story today for the Free Press, 3 blockbuster trades that would net the Pistons future assets. So check that out. Keep in mind going in that it's an asset-based trade from the Pistons standpoint. They're not the ones getting Zach LaVine or Jimmy Butler, but they're getting players and or picks in return to help facilitate those trades, which is why we're exactly on topic, right? It's because so that $14 million in cap space, the Pistons are in a unique position where they're the only team with cap space, and because of the new CBA, teams will essentially be required to give up some sort of rotation player and or pick to make these trades happen. Like it just has to happen. So with that in mind, do you trade for CJ McCollum or Brandon Ingram, or do you strictly prioritize capitalizing on being the only team with cap space, knowing that after this season, you will not have that luxury again? That's kind of what I was getting at earlier, but I think relative to future years, I think them having cap space this year is really sort of the critical thing that they need to keep in mind when they make any moves.
Yeah.
Real quick, Laz, I want to, couple things. One, the Pistons do have the most cap space. There are teams out there that have the non-tax MLE, and they can use those as trade exceptions.
Yeah.
So, and that's like 12-8 or something. So you're right, Omari. Like what they did with Paul Reed made them the most attractive because they have more than anybody else. But there are other teams that if somebody's just moving, like Pat Connaughton's a name, like if somebody's just looking to move like 9 or 10 million.
That's on the list.
Yeah. So, and Pat is another CBA name because what the Bucks need to do is they need to move Pat Connaughton to get below the second apron so then they can aggregate players and all of the stuff that's very confusing. And this was not an original thought by me. I've just heard other people say it enough that I can regurgitate it. So, Laz, is it truly the Pat Connaughton future assets? I love the thread the needle. And when I say thread the needle, I'm talking like the Lonzo Ball move, or, you know, somebody brings up Bobby, like a guy that can actually be in the rotation and fix things. Portis, not as much exactly what we're talking about. Where are you at? Like, are you just future assets, or are you like the thread the needle, the guy can actually be in the rotation also?
I think thread the needle it'd probably go like thread the needle, future assets, like blockbuster in a stack rank. And like in my mind, like the Kobe White or like the Bobby Portis, who is a name that I have also seen, would be good, like thread the needle, like useful rotation NBA players, but like not breaking the bank and not guys that like feel like you feel like you have to immediately insert in the starting lineup and like mess up the vibes or whatever. Like a Bobby Portis, Isaiah Stewart, like front court would be like fun to watch on some nights. Like absolutely. Yes. Mr. Ray. Yeah, that would have been fun in Orlando last night, right?
Yeah. Like crazy eyes, Bobby. I love Bobby Portis, man. Like I've realized I'm a Bobby Portis supporter. Yo, nobody is messing with this team. Nobody is scrapping with Bobby Portis, Isaiah Stewart, and Ron Holland. Like, get out of here. Like nobody's coming in and trying to.
That's the thing.
Pistons.
So you can only have so many firecrackers, and the Pistons have 2. Like, can you go all the way in with 3? I don't know.
Yes, you can, because Stu's gonna. Here's the thing. Listen, I love Isaiah Stewart, and I took a lot of crap for saying Isaiah Stewart was a good player for a couple years, and now everybody loves him all of a sudden. But that man has to stop fouling in egregious situations that get him off the court. It's my biggest beef with him right now. So
he needs to learn like a little bit of subtlety, right? When he gives like the two-handed back push shove, is like, come on. Like, I understand why people are mad at you, man. Like, I get it.
Like, Stu, I'm not even watching you, and I still saw it out of the corner of my eye. Like, you just, like, wait a few possessions before you get back at him. We all just watched you scuffle in front of the bench. You can't immediately go to the next possession and shove him to the ground. Like, just a little bit of subtlety. I wish I would have done the beef on purpose, Omari. I did not. Like, I shout out B Bobbler, Mr. A. I love it. Have to order a Bobby Portis bobblehead. Yeah, just take a picture of him and then send it in to B Bobbler, and they make the most accurate bobblehead you'll ever see. Okay, keep going.
Next on my list is Grayson Allen, like another thread the needle guy, another rotation guy, kind of as again, like now I feel a little bit more, it's like we can start Beasley and put Grayson Allen like kind of into that Beasley role, and he can be here for I think his contract is like for the next couple of years. If you're not confident you can retain Beasley, like Grayson Allen can functionally like be a second Beasley like next season. And as we talked about, like Phoenix has a lot of cap contortions that they're like trying to make happen, and they don't really, and they're not as attached to Grayson Allen as they were when they gave him that extension in the first place. So like, yeah, that's a good functional piece. Like I think that's something that's like plausible.
I heard they have some first round picks they can trade now as well.
I saw a clip on, I actually think it was Blue Sky, of like some like sixth grader like going off, and they're like, "This is who Phoenix like just traded away."
Ryan Anton, Stu pushes a guy and Allen trips him to finish the job.
Maybe. I didn't realize so many crazy eyes guys were on my list.
Yeah, you went all in on the tough guys or whatever you want to say. Just for the record for everybody, Grayson Allen has 3 more years after this year, 15, 17, 18, player option at 19.
I think he will pick up that $19 million player option.
I think he would do that as well. Knicks 100 a GM says Gotham City checking in. Okay, I did not expect the Knicks checking in here, but we appreciate it. We've talked about Miles Turner. I don't think we need to do that on this episode. Mohammed, I appreciate you bringing up the name. Somebody else brought him up earlier. Laz, I assume you agree that Miles Turner would be awesome.
He'd be great. But you can sign him in the offseason, right?
Yeah, I mean, if they, again, so let's go here real quick.
If you do like cap space machinations or whatever.
So Derek Brown says, and again, I wanted to get these for sure. What Derek says, are you concerned if Cade makes all NBA, then he would get a super max and hurt our cap space down the road?
No, it doesn't work like that. He already signed the contract.
No, it goes up $8 million.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, that's one of those good problems.
He got the designated player language, which means if he makes all NBA, and this, whenever it happened, Omari, I said, I don't care. Cause if he makes all NBA, that means he's worth the money.
Yeah.
But with him getting that, I think there is still avenue. They could be a cap space team if they wanted, right? Like you could get off of money, but it makes it a little bit harder when you factor in his $8 million cap hit. And listen, I think he's all NBA right now. I did it. I didn't plan on making him all NBA, and I definitely had him on third team.
Luka's injury opened the door for like him and like some other guys.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the guys, like Luka's not there, Joel can't be there. Even if like the Mavs were really good and like you wanted to give them a player, Kyrie doesn't have, I think he was like really close whenever I did the percentages. So Omari, I don't think this is I don't think this is an under the cap team this offseason. I think they're going to be over the cap, it seems like.
No, it definitely seems that way. You know, which again, like you have cap space, so yeah, you got to do it now.
Omari, in that Miami trade you had in your piece, was Alec Burks in that?
No, so the Miami trade I had was Jimmy Butler ending up in Golden State. So essentially, the Pistons get Kuminga, Haywood Highsmith, and then a first rounder from Golden State, and then a second rounder from the Heat. And essentially from the Heat's end, trading Highsmith to the Pistons allows them to stay under the first. It gets them under the first apron.
Okay.
You know, which is key for them. But they also get Andrew Wiggins, Gary Payton II, Looney, and then a 28 first from the Warriors. So Wiggins is like the biggest contract, but then you get some expiring salary and a first. And then the Warriors just get Jimmy Butler. So that's that trade basically. So it doesn't get them a point guard or anything, but you get Kuminga, who might be something. Like Haywood Highsmith is a rotation guy, and you get a first. So just facilitatory, Warriors get Jimmy, and then Miami gets some assets, some cap relief, and they get under the first apron.
I have to ask both of you, like, are we all out on the Bradley Beal?
Yes. Were we ever on the Bradley Beal?
No, I just wanted to make sure. Like, this was like, I was
never in.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, maybe I should have. Are we all still out on Bradley Beal? I don't think I'd ask the question.
To facilitate a Bradley Beal trade, but I don't want Bradley Beal. And with the no trade clause, I don't think Bradley Beal would want to be here either.
Yeah.
And so that nixes that. I think we're good.
It just makes it more plausible now that they do have 3 first-round picks because they can attach a first-round pick to Bill. The other thing I want to emphasize there is Detroit doesn't have so much cap space they can just take in Bill. They would have to send out dudes to make that happen, and you're talking about actual rotation players as well. Okay, Lonzo Ball, that's another name that gets brought up a lot. I think he makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
That's another one, though. You can't just take him into the salary cap.
$20 million?
20, so it's
but you can send back Fontecchio. Just do it that way.
Yeah, it'd be so you'd have to move out Fontecchio, who to somebody's point earlier, like he's not like crazy in the rotation. He does play 18 minutes a night. Like he does play every night. It's not insane. I think Lonzo makes a ton of sense. It's just like, are you just straight up making that trade? Like, I think I would be interested in that. The problem isn't this the anti of what Trajan has shown us so far in his acquisition of players? The common theme between Tobias, Malik, and Tim Hardaway Jr. is those guys play a lot.
Yep.
They did coming in, and they've done it so far this year. That's not Lonzo, but he is expiring. Good defender, theoretically spaces the floor. I know he hasn't this year. Does a little bit of creation, and let's just say this: like draft picks aside, Fontecchio for Lonzo, is that an upgrade? Is that interesting way of using the cap space?
I think that is helpful to the Pistons in a way that like I would definitely heavily consider. Like, I'd probably do that if the Bulls were in a position where they felt like they wanted to make that happen. I think I like my Kobe White idea like a little bit better. Again, just because Kobe White is probably, I can rely on him to be in the rotation a little bit more than I feel like I can rely on Lonzo. And he's a little bit more of a bucket getter than Lonzo is. But if you're like talking about like, oh, we need a guy to run the second unit, like Lonzo can like absolutely do that if he plays.
Yeah, that's so. Listen, I'll get you thoughts on this as well, Omari. The person that floated this to me, my pushback was, I think they actually wanted to trade Tim Hardaway Jr. But my pushback was like, okay, sure, Lonzo could be better theoretically than Tim Hardaway Jr., but what are the chances I trade for Lonzo Ball and then I get 100 minutes the rest of the season from him? And now I've taken a real floor spacer off the floor in Tim Hardaway Jr. I know Lonzo is better defensively, but like Tim Hardaway Jr. tries really hard. Like he plays hard. Plus, man, like he takes charges, and I love that he takes charges. So, Omari, your thoughts on? Let's stay with the Fontecchio idea here for Lonzo Ball. Is that something you could see yourself interested in?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely be interested in that. Like, I think Lonzo, like just his game fits this team a lot. Like he's like the exact type of guard that I think you want in between K and J.I. as a guy who could defend, space the floor. Obviously, a really good passer. I guess the thing with that is from Chicago's, and you probably have to attach a second if you're the Pistons because you are taking on salary next season.
True.
Like,
that's true. Yeah.
So from Chicago's standpoint, do I trade him to the Pistons and, maybe I get a second round pick, or is there better value elsewhere? So that's my question for that from the Pistons, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
Amari, I had one more name. I had a couple more names on my list I wanted to run by you. Speaking of, like,
I have one too. After you're through with that.
Amari, where is Brazil?
South America.
Okay, just making sure. What
Well,
time is it there?
Couldn't tell you.
it's like the
Same time.
It's the same time.
Close. It's like same as Eastern time.
So I had at work, we had an engineering team in Argentina. And at first I was also like, oh God, like I'm gonna have to meet these guys like 3 hours time differences. Like, no, it's the exact same time.
It's 1 p.m. It's 2 hours after.
2 hours ahead.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to run, speaking of vets who play in vets with good vibes, like what do you think about like an Alec Burks return to Detroit? Because he's not being used in Miami. It's purely ancillary. Like, yeah, you're competing with Miami for like, you're in that like playing like range, but as a guy who would be like a cheap bucket getter and who I think would fit in with the locker room really well, like Alec Burks was like a name I came up with.
Yeah. I think he fits for sure. I don't know if he necessarily solves like the ball handling aspect, like he can do it, but along with that, like that's a very cheap, quick, easy option, right? If you just want to plug that hole in some capacity. So, I say, why not?
Wes says, what's Boyan doing these days? I mean, we can bring in Monte Morris while we're at it. And listen, I thought Monte Morris was actually
it was a good signing.
Right.
It just didn't work.
It was a good process move by Troy Weaver. It just didn't. In the mock trade deadline thing I'm doing, where Wes has helped me out, we were this close to getting Chris Paul. Like the deal was done, and then the person ended up taking a different deal because in that they had traded for Trae Young and they didn't need Chris Paul anymore. And like there was a whole it's gone off the rails. But I was like, oh, this is going to be like Chris Paul is exactly what we're talking about. Another name that came up in that exercise that I wouldn't have thought about was Dante Exum. But now you're still getting into the.
Is he hurt?
Like
he's hurt.
He hasn't played. Yeah, he hasn't played this year. I think he's the Mavs person that was trying to facilitate the trade was telling me that like he's close, but just in terms of like a guy that facilitates offense and can kind of operate that way, I thought that was an interesting
a good defender. Like
quality defender. So those were just some names. Like Chris Paul isn't.
Yeah, we're not giving Chris
real.
Paul.
That's not rational. Yeah. Amari, you said you had one for Laz.
Yes. So this name has not been brought up, I think, anywhere at all. But
let's go.
But I also want to just give myself a pat on the back because it took me all day yesterday to come with 3 trades that not only made sense for all 3 teams and worked financially, but also accomplished additional goals like getting under the second apron or first apron and all that. Like, it's crazy now. The new CBA is crazy. But anyway, if the Grizzlies wanted to trade for Zach LaVine, and I think that they're a team that kind of has everything they want to trade for Zach LaVine if they wanted to, and I think it's fit in that team like as a third guy with John Jaren and like that gives you like a lot of firepower. They could send Marcus Smart to Detroit. Marcus Smart.
I've heard this one.
$42 million. Pistons get some sort of draft compensation from the Grizzlies. They have all their first round picks plus a 2030 first. So out of that 2030 first from Phoenix or Washington actually going to Chicago since they're trading LaVine, and maybe the Pistons get the Grizzlies first in 2025.
Who'd you have Detroit sending out? Because they would have to send out something, right?
Yeah. So they would send out. So the Bulls essentially would receive like not a whole lot, like mostly just like cap relief essentially, along with that 2030 pick, which could be really, really good for them. But they get Luke Kennard expiring. They get Fontecchio. They get John Conchar, who's like making $18 million over 3 years. And then they get that 2030 first from Phoenix or Washington. So essentially like a mix of cap relief / easily movable contracts, and then a pretty nice first rounder for LaVine. And then, the Pistons just get Marcus Smart in the first, and then, LaVine just goes to the Grizzlies. So Marcus Smart, he probably had his best game of the season against the Pistons when they went down to Memphis in November. But if you're just looking at a guy who can, that's a contract the Grizzlies would want to get off of because they would be able to get LaVine and still stay under the first apron by sending Marcus Smart to the Pistons, right? Marcus Smart plays defense. He can heat up from 3. He's been injured a lot, so you would hope he stays healthy. But as a guy who could just literally just be like a backup sort of an insurance guy, like high locker room fit, obviously next season, like I think you could spin the wheels on Marcus Smart probably and feel pretty good about it. Like, I think that's probably the exact type of deal you look at to fill a need without overcommitting, and you still picked up an asset in return as well.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I've been a lot less interested in Marcus Smart since the injuries started to pile up. And he always kind of played a style of basketball that made me think his career would have a really steep drop. But the theoretical version of Marcus Smart, even the more aged theoretical version of Marcus Smart that you would get would be something that I would be interested in. Yeah. And if all it costs you is Fontecchio, right? Is that. Yeah, that's a perfectly acceptable.
And you get draft capital for taking on
you
get
contract. A draft pick. Yeah.
Wes says guards that can handle ball handling now and then play off of Ivy later. Very interesting in theory. I think that's the one. In theory, this makes sense to me. And I will say Sam has actually floated this one to me. And his theory was, my favorite term, data collection. He said Marcus Smart is a great data collection for Jalen Duren's defense because Marcus Smart is going to fight over ball screens and navigate screens. And then it can no longer be, well, Jalen wasn't really in the right spot, but also Cade didn't help him because he didn't navigate that screen very well. Or, Ron, not navigating by the way, Ausar navigated screens really well last night. I thought it was one of his best games navigating screens, which was a really big improvement. So yeah, I think Smart, it's similar idea to Lonzo where it's a guy that can handle the ball handling. I know a YouTube user brought up, is Lonzo's defense still as good? I think the thing with both of these guys is just injuries and age and some of that stuff is starting to sneak up. So I don't know. It makes the trade deadline fun. I'm excited for it for the Pistons perspective because as you said, you gave your hierarchy, there is the thread the needle where, hey, this is a rotation guy that fits into the cap space and makes the team better. There's the straight asset. Would you be upset, I guess, Laz, real quick? What would your level of that's not really that intriguing. What if they just sell it out for 2 second-round picks? What's your interest level in that? This guy's not going to, Pat Connaughton can't shoot, not going to be able to be in the rotation.
I'd be totally fine if they were hey, yeah, we got 2 second-round picks and Pat Connaughton, and Pat's just here. It's all right, that, I'd be fine with that. I think Bucks fans would be very excited to make that happen, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, if all they did was collect more assets, I would also be fine with that because if they're doing that, they're not doing anything that I think would impact the rotation too much. And then at that point, it is, again, definitely a sense of, all right, let's get more data. Let's make the play. Let's put ourselves in a position to make the play in and see where we are. Like, see what our compete level is like. Again, like maybe you hit the scenario where you get swept by the Celtics or whatever. But again, that would be a perfectly acceptable end to the season. So yeah, I'd be fine with that.
All right, real quick. Matthew says Laz was the first voice I heard frequently in the podcast era. Shout out to Laz. OG, yes. And then Derek Brown, I want to get to this because, again, he gave us that super chat and he had this question as well. So your guys' quick thoughts, Laz and Omari. Santi Aldama, realistic option for the Pistons this offseason. He's a free agent. I just want to reiterate, he is a restricted free agent and has been very good for the Grizzlies this year. I got yelled at. Let me look that up. I got yelled at by some Grizzlies people for not mentioning him as in our 6th man of the year. He's only 24.
Oh, okay. That's younger than I thought it was. Okay.
So my quick thoughts is he would make a lot of sense. I like that archetype, and I think it makes sense for this team. I don't think Memphis is probably letting that guy get out of Memphis.
Yeah.
Laz?
It's the exact same thing. He's one of those guys where like I didn't know if he was good or not because I felt like every time I watched him, he played really well. And then you'd go to his basketball reference and he'd like average like 8 points. And you're like, he doesn't seem like an 8-point per game guy, but like, so yeah, but I would be interested in Santi Aldama. I do like a lot of what he brings to the table. Love the defensive effort, like the ability to stretch the floor a little bit from that like straight 4 position. Yeah, I'd be cool with that. Amari?
Yeah, I would say so. Like, yeah, I think Aldama is one of the more underrated guys in the league. It has been for a couple seasons, and he's having his best season for them now. And kind of going back to that Marcus Smart trade again, they stay under the first apron. The Grizzlies still have young guys that they're going to pay at some point. Like they have 4 or 5 guys on rookie deals who are probably worth paying. So again, I think any deal they could make that maintains cap flexibility at the deadline while still winning the next buys window makes sense for them. So yeah, I don't think they let Aldama go, but I mean, if the Pistons could get him for a reasonable contract, by all means, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. You said Grizzlies Levine trade, and I was like, we're getting Desmond Bane? Because like I didn't understand. I don't have a great sense of the Grizzlies cap sheet, but like, yeah, if they could afford all 4 of those guys and like still stay like under an apron, like that'd be really impressive.
Yeah, like that's what it was. Like I looked at it, and yeah, essentially in that trade, you're only sending out Luke Kennard, Conchar, and a couple 1st-round picks for Levine, and you stay under the first apron. Yeah, if my math was correct. So yeah.
Wes said someone in the pin down comments brought up Stu for Aldama, and we couldn't figure out why either team would want to lose the guy to get the other. Yeah. I would very clearly say that I would not do that. Again, I like Aldama. I realize the raw numbers are better. Yeah. I think Stu has shown his value, especially until you get, I'll leave it there. I think Stu has shown his value.
Yeah, Amari can speak to this better than I can, though, but like Memphis would love Stu, probably.
Yes.
I feel like he would be an interesting fit there for sure. So, all right, we've taken up enough of your time, Laz. I wanted to get some more like direct thoughts on Jalen Duren and Holland and Ausar. We didn't get to it.
My only Duren, I wanted to talk to you about this, Bryce. Like, I got time. I don't know if you guys have time.
Okay, I have time.
Yeah. Duren still is like, he'll be parallel with the lane line on defense like far too often for my taste, and like his hips still don't swivel in the way that like I'd like them to, but I really like the way he's attacked the offensive glass. It's like, what kind of contract are you thinking about for Jalen Duren? Because that's where my mind is going, right? Because we're talking about cap sheets and we're talking about cap space next offseason. We're talking about Cade's Supermax kicking in. It's like Jalen Duren is very clearly like not going to get a Supermax. It was like, I don't know, like Stu makes like 16. It's like, do I really want to give like 4 years, 80 million to Jalen Duren? Like, I don't know how much I love that.
My theory is the contract I would be comfortable offering Jalen Duren is not one that Jalen Duren would be willing to accept. And so my guess is this plays out with
game. Yeah.
They'll play the restricted free agency game. They'll take another year of data and we'll see how it goes. And listen, I think he's made strides defensively. I truly do. Like, I think he's protected the rim. And so he even had a rotation one late in the game last night. He's done better with his hand activity in the ball screens in some situations. What you talked about in the ball screen where he gets his hips completely turned to the sideline instead of being able to stay square and drop is a major concern because he's not Victor Wembanyama. Victor does that, but Victor's 7'5" and fluid and can make up for it.
8 wingspan or whatever. Like, yeah, he can be in 2 places at once.
Victor defies all of the fundamental ways that you have to defend ball screens as a big because of his length and his movement. Jalen Duren doesn't. And then also, like, I love the way they play at the level at times, But notice how much more effective Paul Reed is than Jalen Duren, simply because Paul Reed is so aggressive with his hands and active with his hands. Duren isn't. And then Duren also doesn't move as well as I thought he was going to on the perimeter. I thought Duren was going to have switchability defensively. And not only does he not have that, he doesn't stay. When they're playing at the level, he gets beat around by the ball handler a lot. So there's some real defensive things. And the other, I could live with the defensive stuff if some more of the offensive growth had happened. But it's not like there's no mid-range jumper. The passing isn't like wowing me or anything like that. I just... Like, sure, if you want to give him the Isaiah Stewart contract, which is essentially a backup big contract, I suppose I could live with that, having 2 backup big contracts and then figuring it out. But he's not taking that, right? Like,
no, yeah.
So, Omari, where are you at on Jalen Duren and kind of that?
Yeah, like I think you go into, probably just the year for offseason with JD. Yeah, like for him, I would definitely want another year of evaluation. I'm probably in the same boat as Laz. Like, there's certain things you have to see really before you commit like that real type of money to him. So that's probably a different type of timeline.
Nix, tell us what's the trade offer? What is New York sending back? Omari Sankofa, the OG, says great article. O2, I like that. O2. Can I call you O2? Can I call you?
Yeah, you call me O2. Yeah.
I like that. That's smooth. He said, no cap. Your dad is so cool, man. No cap. No 01 bias. Brilliant. No, you are brilliant.
Appreciate you, Dad.
Mr. Sankofa. We all know where Omari gets it from. Yeah, Derek Brown says, just go for another hour, guys. Yeah.
I wish I could, honestly.
It's like Omari's got
Laz
back on, so.
Yeah, all right. We'll have Laz back on again soon. That's good stuff on Duren, though. That was probably something we needed to talk about real quick. So, all right, Laz, let people know where you're at, what you're doing, what you got going on, because as we know, the people love your voice. They love your thoughts. They want to keep track of you. So let them know.
I don't know if you can tell, I have a new background. I recently moved into a new place. Been very excited about that. With things being stable, my hope is that I'll be able to contribute a little bit more at DetroitBadBoys.com, which you should all be following and listening to. I would love to make a pin down appearance. Hint, hint, wink, wink.
Wes, what are we doing?
Every now and again. You can find me on Blue Sky at Last Chance, and you can also find me on X at Last Chance. I was lucky to get the same name in both places, and I checked both of them, but I do find myself checking both of them just like a lot less recently. But if you guys know how to get a hold of me though, and I always love talking with you guys, so I have no issues with this. You can call me whenever.
Mr. Ray West fumbling the bag. Yeah, Wes, listen, man, you do a great job. I love you and Blake, but not getting Laz on is crazy. Talk,
Wes.
So.
Come on, man.
Yeah. All right. Omari, take it. O2, take it away, my guy.
All right. Yeah. Look, Laz, always a lot of fun having you on. We'll definitely have to get you on again here soon. Maybe once we get past the deadline or All-Star break, just to put the rest of the season into perspective. Because honestly, this is the first time we're ever going to be past the deadline with basketball to talk about, it won't just be early off-season talk. So personally, I'm excited for that. But again, thank you so much for that. We always love having you on. And with that, I'll close us out. Big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and big shout out to Wes Davenport, as always. And we'll talk to you all next week.